What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Rants and Reviews. I have been reading on and off since I was a kid, but recently I've become a little bit obsessed. In 2018, I read 24 books, which was a record for me. In 2019, I read 62 books. In 2020, I read 72. And in 2021, I'm on pace for 80 books. And I'm a slow reader with both a full-time and a part-time job. My point being, anyone can read more if they really want to. So if you want to read more books, I'm going to share 5 tips with you today that have worked really well for me and my reading productivity. So let's get started. Number 1, the most important tip, figure out what interests you. None of these other tips really work if you're reading books that you don't enjoy. Now, I said I've been on and off reading my whole life, and that's true. I was reading a lot when I was a kid, but when I got to high school and university, I pretty much stopped reading altogether. And this was majorly because I didn't want to read the books I was being assigned in university. In high school, I didn't enjoy them, and it really killed my enthusiasm for reading. So I get into this argument a lot with my students and with other people as well who say they don't like reading. I don't believe anyone that says they don't like reading. What I do believe is that they don't like reading the books that they've read so far. And I just think that that's not a great reason to give up. You just need to be able to find the kind of books that interest you. Now, this is going to be different for every single person. I think a good place to start is just to ask yourself what you're interested in life, whether it's history, self-improvement, fitness, diet, fiction, comics, whatever it is that you find interesting in your life, you should be able to find books on that subject, and you will probably enjoy reading those books more than books about things that you don't like. I know it sounds simple, but that is my number 1 tip, is just try to find books that you like, that are on subject matters that interest you. Once you do that, all these other steps will become easier. Tip number 2 is use external tools for motivation. What I mean by that is sharing your thoughts on books with other people is fun, and it adds motivation for reading. Peer pressure in itself is an excellent motivator for reading. This is why people join book clubs, because if there's a set date you have to finish a book by and you know you're going to be discussing it with other people, sometimes that pressure is what motivates people to actually get their books read in time and to read more. Now, I don't actually join any book clubs, but for me, I use Goodreads, which is a website. Yes, it's owned by evil Amazon. Don't support them. Oh my God. But it works so many wonders for me because I'm not really a social reader in the sense that I want to be part of a book club or anything like this. But I do like to keep track of everything, and I do like to motivate myself. And Goodreads allows me to do that in a couple of different ways. First of all, I love to use the reading challenge, which basically gives yourself a reading goal for the year, and you can just constantly check up on it and see how you're progressing, if you're behind, if you're ahead of schedule. And it's just an arbitrary measurement to keep you focused and to try to make you push a little bit further. It's not that much different than what people who exercise do when they try to make themselves do more reps than they did the week before or increase the weight. So I really like to use the reading challenge on Goodreads. I also like to add other users that read similar books as I do. So sometimes I'll see them reading a book that I haven't heard of, and I'll check it out and I'll say, oh yeah, actually that sounds like something I would like to read as well. And this brings me to another part of Goodreads that I love, which is the want to read shelf, which is just a great way of keeping track of all the books that interest you, that you want to eventually get your hands on, that you haven't yet. Before using this, I would just forget what books I actually wanted to buy or what books I was looking for. Now that I have Goodreads, every time I go to the library or I'm at a bookstore, I can check my own shelf to see if this was something that I was looking for that had piqued my interest before. And that's really helped me, again, going back to point 1, it's helped me to collect books that I'm interested in reading, which helps me read more. Tip number 3 is read 2 books at once, one print book and one audiobook. Finding ways to work in audiobooks to my reading experience has really elevated my quantity of books per year, especially this year and last year. One of my favorite things to do actually is to play a mindless video game on mute while listening to an audiobook simultaneously. I also almost always listen to the audiobooks on 1.25 or even 1.5 playback speed, depending on the narrator, which helps me to read them even quicker. This is probably like my favorite activity during holiday or break when I have some free time and I can just kind of sit around and relax. I can sit around and relax and do something while also reading. Audiobooks are also great for just things that you're doing around the house, which leads us to tip number 4. Maximize your reading opportunities. So first of all, I have about a 40-minute commute to work every day. There, 40 minutes, back, 40 minutes. So there's an hour and a half almost a day that I get to use to read. Now, it's not always possible, but what I try to do is actually listen to my audiobook while I'm walking to the train. And even while I'm on the train, I will listen to my audiobook, or sometimes I'll turn it off and read my print book, which I have in my bag. But basically, if I can take that hour and a half of commute time per day and turn it into reading time, then that's just more reading that I'm getting done. Now, when I go to the gym, which is not often, but when I do go to the gym, once again, I bring my audiobook with me. So while I'm exercising, I'm listening to my audiobook, and there I get another hour of reading done. Also, anytime you're just doing things around the house that are sort of mindless, like laundry or cleaning, it's nice to put on an audiobook as well. Once again, you can be listening or reading a book while you're doing something else that doesn't really require your attention. I also always make sure to read a book before bed. Depends, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes a half an hour, sometimes an hour. Regardless, just getting into that habit of reading before bed does a couple of good things for you. First of all, again, it helps you read more. Secondly, it helps you sleep. So it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But yeah, just maximizing your reading opportunities. If you have time to mindlessly look at your phone and check Facebook or Instagram for the 4,000th time, then you have time to be reading, whether it's on a Kindle, whether you're on the audiobook, whether you bring a print book with you. I mean, I bring books everywhere. Even if I'm just taking a 10-minute taxi ride somewhere, I'll usually have a book with me. Even if I can read 3 or 4 pages, that's better than nothing. So just maximizing your opportunities to read more is really important. And tip number 5 is improving your reading speed. Now, I am a slow reader. I'm either average or below average in reading speed. And I have seen some people talking about, oh, I read 280 books a year. I read 500 books a year. And these people are usually speed readers. Now, I have mixed feelings about speed reading. I know everyone's different. So if someone can read a book a day and they still understand it and enjoy it, then more power to them. Personally, for me, I don't want to read too fast because I find that if I'm racing through a book, I'm not getting the same amount of enjoyment as I do when I take my time. But there have been a couple of tips that I've learned too, in particular from speed reading sort of classes and tutorials that I've seen online that I'd like to share with you that I do think are useful. The first one is most readers, when they're reading, tend to basically read the words on the page and read them out loud in a voice in their head. And I have been doing this forever. And it's a really hard habit to break. But if you can get yourself to the point where you're not reading out loud in your own head, you'll be able to read a lot faster. And that sort of ties into my second point, which is another tip I picked up from a speed reading tutorial that actually works for me pretty well. I don't always use it, but I do practice it from time to time. And that is the idea of bouncing across the page. The basic idea is that your eyes can see peripherally, and you don't actually need to lock onto each individual word and read that word to understand what you're reading or to even get everything that you're reading, that your eyes are actually able to sort of bounce every 3 or 5 words, and it will pick up the words around it and fill all of that information in for you. So, what a lot of people like to do is take their book and sort of visually divide it into either 2 columns or 3 columns. And then as they're reading, just sort of focus on one word per column, either column, column, or column, column, column. And you just sort of bounce your eyes. And if you can train yourself to do that and practice doing that, you'll find that you're getting the same level of comprehension, usually, depending on how dense the text is. But you'll find that you'll still get that same level of comprehension, and you'll also be reading a lot faster. And this will also help you break out of that habit of reading in your own voice inside of your head. So these are 5 tips that I've used in the last couple of years to really up my reading potential and my reading output. And hopefully, these are tips that will work for you as well. Let me know if you have any tips that you use that I didn't mention, or if these tips were helpful at all. And I'll see you next time on Ransom Reviews.